This is my presentation over Breaking Bad and Walter White, who I describe as Breaking Bad's anti-hero. So first, let's talk about Breaking Bad and its significance and connections to society. So that way you can learn a little bit more about Breaking Bad if you've never seen it and get a little bit of background information on what's going on. So initially, Breaking Bad was a series that ran from 2008 to 2013. Viewers were able to watch the show on AMC. And when we look at this show, we see that it fits in with society's war on drugs. And also it includes a topic of cancer, which we commonly hear about. We know it's commonly diagnosed. Maybe this is relatable to us as viewers as well. Maybe we're used to seeing topics of drugs on the news. Maybe we read about it on social media. Maybe we read it online. And then when it comes to the topic of cancer, maybe this is something that is personal to us. Maybe we know someone who's diagnosed with it. Maybe a friend, a family member, or maybe it's something that we're passionate about. Maybe it is something that you are an advocate for. So I believe these two first concepts make this show automatically relatable to us. So it includes two really huge topics that we see create some things further on down the line. Let's talk about the character Walter White. So Walter White is one of our main characters, and he's also built as a relatable individual. So not only are a couple of the main topics in the show something that's relatable, but he is built to be a relatable character as well. So not only is he an American father, but he teaches chemistry at a local high school. He has a wife, her name is Skylar, and when the show begins, she is actually pregnant with their daughter, who they name Holly. He also has a son, who is Walter Jr., and Walter Jr. actually goes to the high school that Walt teaches at. So he drives him to school every single morning. And he also works a second job at a car wash for additional income. So we see Walter White as an individual who supports his family. He's there to have dinner with them every night. We see him as such a family man. But not only that, we see him as someone who's pretty quiet. He kind of keeps to himself and doesn't seem to let things bother him very much. He kind of lets people push him around, and he really never has a say on anything that happens in his life. So when we first see Walter, we can kind of see him as maybe someone who might be relatable. Maybe we have a teacher that we know about in our life who's important to us. Even the fact that he's married, he has a wife who's pregnant, and he has a son. So both of these that he feels like he's responsible to take care of and to make sure that they're well taken care of and to love. And then also like having a job that you go to every day. I believe that the way that he's established makes him relatable. Maybe relate to not only what he does in his life, but maybe how he acts. Maybe we are the kind of individual that's shy, or maybe we see that we let ourselves get pushed around. So I believe that he is built in such a way that it makes us relatable to him in so many ways. Now let's dig a little bit deeper so you know what happens next. So Walter ends up getting diagnosed with lung cancer. And how this happens is he believes that he just has a common cold, maybe it's bronchitis, something like that. He just feels like it is something that he's fighting off and that everything is okay. Well, after collapsing at work at a second job at the car wash, he has to take an ambulance to the hospital. And on the way, he's asked if he's ever been a smoker. And he replies no. So that gives viewers a little bit of a foreshadowing as to this probably isn't going to be good for Walter. So after the analysis of his screenings, it comes back that he actually does have lung cancer and it is stage 3. Essentially, the doctor tells him that this is a death sentence and it's something that he can treat, but will probably not survive in the end. So this is where I believe that Walter and his situation become much less relatable. So what he does is he decides to create a savings for his family. And by doing this, he decides to meet up with Jesse Pinkman, who he found out is also a meth cook and a meth dealer who is local. So once he found this out through his brother-in-law, who is a DEA agent, he meets up with him and they decide that they are going to cook and sell meth. And this was going to be a way for him to create a savings for his family when he passes away. But I still believe there is a little bit of relatability in there and some connection to society. I believe as individuals, especially if we're in Walter's situation where we feel like we are a provider for our family and you have children to take care of and you've just gotten this death sentence, most individuals would want to find a way to provide for their family. But is everyone going to decide to cook and sell meth to do so? Now that you know a little bit of backstory on Walter White and his family, let's look at some critical points of Breaking Bad. So first, I thought it was very critical to obviously analyze Walter White's character because as we discussed earlier, we see him initially at the beginning a relatable and American father who gets a cancer diagnosis, which for him is essentially a death sentence. He knows he only has a few more years to live and to meet his goal of making his family financially secure in secret when he passes. However, we see him once he begins to cook this meth and he becomes extremely successful. So his meth ends up becoming the best on the market. It's clear as glass and it's a hot commodity. Everyone wants to get their hands on it. But in this process, he becomes pretty ruthless. So he becomes a very ruthless meth cook and a dealer. So for me, I believe that made him an anti-hero. Now that you have a little bit more information on Breaking Bad and some things that are happening, let's look at some critical points of Breaking Bad. So when I began this, I knew it was very critical for me to not only analyze Walter White as a character, but the more that I dug into my ARP, I believed it was very critical to also look at Skyler White and do a character analysis on her as well. I wanted to see how this cancer diagnosis affected both of them. Was this always in Walter White? So let's kind of dig in and take a deeper look. So initially we see that Walter White is created as a relatable American father, like we discussed. He gets the cancer diagnosis, which is a death sentence for him. But after this, to provide for his family, he becomes a meth cook and a dealer. So the meth that he is cooking with Jesse is the purest on the market, and it's such a hot commodity. So I believe the fact that he's trying to provide for his family and to do the right thing and to set them up once he's gone is a fantastic thing to do. However, I believe the way that he goes about it and some of his actions, well, a lot of his actions in the process, indeed make him an anti-hero. But that led me to the question, was this always in Walter White? And why did we just see the side of Walter after his cancer diagnosis? So some may believe that Walter's always had this seed in him to behave in such ways. And I absolutely agree. I believe that one cannot just get a cancer diagnosis and be able to do so many of the ruthless things that Walter was able to do so easily. It came to him so quickly. But, however, some viewers may believe that it was the cancer that created these characteristics. So that was a huge stance that I had to decide on what I wanted to take. And, of course, I decided that this was always in him, and I believe things were amplified by his cancer, and it maybe allowed it to emerge in a much more extreme way than maybe if he had not had the cancer. But while I knew it was important to look at Walter, I initially did not see right away that I needed to look at Skyler White as well, who is his wife. But after I got deeper into my ARP and my analysis, I decided that she was also a very critical character because she was so close with him. They had the two children together, and it seemed as if Skyler always knew where Walter was, what he was doing. But once his meth cooking and dealing started, this was not the case. And once I looked back, I saw that we saw a lot of changes in Skyler as well. So we see that Skylar is a loving stay-at-home mom, and she also does various side jobs to provide for her family. So we see that family and their success is very important to her, just like it is Walt's. But we see her start to change when Walter begins selling the meth and he becomes successful. Eventually she gets into the loop and she sticks it out with him, and she eventually helps him launder money. So she uses the money to buy nicer things. So I believe that also makes her an anti-hero, because even though she's wanting to provide for her family, she's wanting to help them, she's wanting to support Walt, I believe some of her actions and the way that she goes about it also makes her an anti-hero, and she has some very anti-hero qualities along the way. So it's important for me to look at that Breaking Bad begins with a relatable American family that goes through significant changes, which is common. It's something that we can relate to. Every family has changes. Every family has obstacles that they have to meet or to get over. But as we see these changes, it challenges our morals as viewers, and we also see it challenge the characters' morals a little bit too. Let's look at the critics that I use and the views that they take on Breaking Bad and Walter White and Skylar White. So my first discusses the changes that we see in Walter stimulate to ours, who are the viewers, their morals, and that we can relate to a moral dilemma and his desire for greed and power. And he believes that it creates a sense of a power fantasy, striving to do better and to provide and to have a mastery of skill. And all of these concepts are relatable to viewers. And his main point overall is he's trying to say that Walter White is an anti-hero. When we look at Julia Mason, she is taking the same view essentially, but with Skylar White, that she is also an anti-hero because she helps Walt launder money, and she also does a lot of other various illegal activities, but she enjoys spending the money and the lavish lifestyle that she's not used to, and she's also willing to break the law to keep up with appearances, have material items, and to be financially secure. And just like any other anti-hero mother, like Julia Mason describes, she'll protect her family and she stays with her criminal husband for a long time before she leaves. But she also loves her children and her family, but they are a priority to her. When we look at Mark Lewis, he says that Walt's cancer diagnosis allows him to take risks that he previously would not have. And Walt goes from victim to victor, and this makes him emboldened and liberated. And then we look at the last critic. They describe Walter White as a failed hero, and that he creates new habits that are criminal but become validated because it is a repeated and habitual bad habit. When it comes to my views and my original claims, I agreed a lot with the critics that I read, and that's why I chose them. I thought they were fantastic, and I thought they had really great views. Like Walter White being an anti-hero, he takes care of his family and he loves them, and he also kills numerous individuals. He kills Crazy 8, and we see that remorse, and that he has such a difficult time completing the task, but it seems to get easier for him every single time. And he does quote-unquote good by cooking meth to save up money for his family after he's gone. And this was only supposed to be temporary until he gets obsessed with the money, the greed, and the power. And then Walter's actions ask us to question our own morals. What would we do in this situation? And then my critics also discuss that Skylar is also an anti-hero. She loves her family. She looks after them. And then she also loves the money coming in from the meth and chooses not to leave Walt and enjoys living this more luxurious life. But these were my thoughts when I was Breaking Bad, where I was in agreement. But as we know for this, it's very important that we have our own take and our own spin and to expand upon things. So I found that my sources complemented my arguments and they strengthened them. But my sources did not talk about a few specific things, and they didn't take some things into consideration. So it allowed me to have an original argument. I was really excited to see that there were sources that aligned with my thoughts, but also allowed me to add my own spin on things. So for example, I already talked about how I believe that Walter had this seed inside of him to act this way. And I just believe that he had never had much reason to display it until he finally had an opportunity for power and control, which he has never had in his life and in his family or in his job. And I failed to mention the danger that the family has put in many times. Skylar and Walt both knowingly put and keep their family in danger, and they do nothing about it. Even though we say that they take care of their family and they love them, they always don't do the best thing for them. And that Walter's new habits derive on greed and power. So these were a couple things that I wanted to mention that my critics didn't really touch on, but I thought were very important. Now, all of these thoughts put together, I created my thesis statement. And my thesis statement is that while Breaking Bad seems to tell the story of a genius chemistry teacher and father selling meth to provide a savings for his family when he passes, and Skylar, who is a supportive wife by his side, it is actually about Walt and Skylar's greed, and Walter having control over his expertise and benefiting himself in the process. We see this action occur through camera angles, dimly lit rooms, and character actions and dialogue. Now, I'd like to take the time to ask you if you have any questions, any thoughts, any oppositions. I would love to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much.